Mekakucity Actors was my introduction to the Kagero project, and after all these years, I still think that the anime is an absolute masterpiece. I was just an entry-level weeb when I first watched it, and at the time, I was still very new to my anime binge and didn't really watch anything else outside of Battle Shonen. Of course, there were a few exceptions that I picked up on because they were very popular in the community that I participated in. Around this time is when my agoraphobia was at its worst, and I didn't even know that I had it back then. You see, I grew up watching Western shows that more often than not mocked it, and it didn't really help that my father conditioned me to believe that how I acted was normal. I didn't even truly know what agoraphobia really was until about 2014, when I first encountered Welcome to the NHK and saw how realistically they represented the condition. After that, I looked around for anime that had shut-in characters of varying different levels, because I wanted to feel a similar connection to what I had with Welcome to the NHK. Honestly, none of them quite impacted me like Mekakucity Actors did. I first watched this anime around late 2015, and at the time I hadn't stepped foot outside of my house in about 3.5 years. This series was something that made me get a bit better after watching it, even if it was just a little victory in the end. In order to talk about this to the fullest, keep in mind that I will be spoiling a couple important events, but I will limit myself to talking mostly about Shintaro, considering he's the reason I feel so strongly about this series. Mekakucity Actors follows Shintaro Kisaragi, a guy who's been a shut-in for 2 years and finally leaves his house after needing to get a new keyboard for his computer. I never would have thought that the guy who's the butt of a joke in the first episode would ever have turned out to be one of the characters I relate to the most in my life. At first, it felt a little insulting, but as I watched more, I learned that all of the jokes were aimed to help Shintaro get more comfortable with where he was. I related to him a lot back in those days, and even more so today. You really learn a lot about him within that first episode. He's rude towards the few people that interact with him on a daily basis, and he's very smart. He's able to think on his toes when things go bad, and he's able to stay relatively calm under pressuring situations because he, for the most part, expects the worst to happen. On the other side of things, his fears are conveyed very well within this introduction. He can't stand people staring at him. The gaze of bystanders fills him with an anxiety that doesn't really quell unless NA talks to him. As I dug more into his character, I really started to understand exactly why I related to him. Hell, I relate to him even more today. How Shintaro carried himself throughout the series spoke a lot to me. As I watched, I saw how much the past has affected his attitude, as well as how much it still weighs him down even after accepting his position. Of course, there were also some subtle things that I couldn't pick up on when I was younger. Those particular things were something that I discovered from listening to his character-specific songs. The way the lyrics could explain things that the anime couldn't took me through an entirely different journey. I also had my suspicion of some things, but I never fully understood Shintaro until I checked out the Kagero project. Mentally, he was a lot like me back then, and when I noticed that was when I started to really appreciate my life, even if it was just by a small margin. Shintaro's inability of dealing with people put him through a great deal of stress, because it made him blame himself for the death of his classmate, Ayano Tateyama. Made him think that he could have stopped her from committing suicide. Those feelings weighed him down until he couldn't take it anymore, and he shut himself away to rot in his room. One of the things that confused me when I was younger at first was the opening scene for episode 11, but Shintaro's songs told me everything about that scene that I could possibly want to know. Learning about Route XX is what made me try to step out of my comfort zone to fight back against my agoraphobia, because I didn't want to be stuck in a rut. Ironically enough though, this route is why I relate even more to Shintaro today. This is the timeline where the death of Ayano got to Shintaro, and instead of just accepting that she died, he rejected it. That rejection caused him to push away the remaining people that are close to him, and eventually leads him to a depression so deep that he decides to take his own life. Route XX impacts me a lot today because, despite the efforts of my past, I'm still stuck here in a very similar rut. Agoraphobia even worse than what it was all those years ago from a combination of several things. Over the years, I've regretted a lot of my decisions, and no matter how much I try to accept them and move on, those decisions won't let me have my peace. It doesn't really help that the moment I decided to actually try to help myself get better, life decided otherwise, turned me away and kicked me back into a 10 by 10 foot room. I deeply resonate with a lot of Shintaro's songs. From his highs to his lows, I constantly found myself in him. In more recent days, I relate the most to his Route XX counterpart because my mind is bogged down with those thoughts. I just want to be strong like he is in the anime route, the route where he succeeds and moves on from his never-ending loop. Seeing how he changed is the thing that lit a fire into my younger self and gave me my optimistic view on life, even if everything else in mine feels worthless. The anime was something that I feel was perfect. The deeper meanings to the songs made me feel emotions that I wasn't really capable of expressing at the time. Even today, this anime brings back thoughts of better times for me. It made me realize how it hasn't aged at all. It's still just as amazing as I thought it was the first time I ever watched it. It makes me a little sad realizing this though. 5 years down the road, and the only thing that's changed was me. Mekakucity actors and the Kagero project as a whole mean the world to me. If there was a series that could represent me perfectly, it would be this. It shaped me to become who I am today, and it's a series that I want more people to talk about with me. I'd appreciate more friends to talk about the Kagero project with in general, because I've met barely anyone who knows about it. Whether you're new to the series or you've been a fan for ages, I hope you'll come join me in the heat haze.